And we're live with our 120th episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Howdy, everybody. We're back with our 120th episode. Super excited to be here as always and to chat with Ken about AppSec stuff. We've been, I don't know, right? Like, we're in the midst of this weird pandemic and everything else is going on, and there's a lot of news to talk about. We haven't really scheduled any trainings. We've been working on waiting to see what happens in the next couple of months to see if we can do something that's in person rather than remote. That being said, there are remote opportunities coming up. If you haven't heard, Cactus Khan is fully remote this year. That's the conference in Phoenix, Arizona, or Mesa, or whatever, larger Phoenix area. That happens every year. Our good friend Andrew Wilson is, now he's on the board. I don't think he's running it day to day this year, but if you haven't heard about it, go to cactuscon.com. It is all free and it's all online this year. Otherwise, Ken, I don't think there's much else on my list of notices. You have anything else you wanted to talk about before we dive into separate topics today?
No, I was just going to say Cactus Khan is just reminds me of the early years of ShmooCon, where it's like a very versatile mix of topics and it's a hobbyist conference. Would you say a hobbyist conference is fairly correct? I would say it's not as much of a vendor. There are vendors, but it's not it doesn't feel as much of it feels more like I said, a hobbyist conference, if anything.
Yeah. I'll throw the URL up there. But they do have all the talks posted, what's up, and workshops and other things. I'm going to miss it this year, right? Actually getting down there. I always enjoy that group. I used to work for a company that was based out of Phoenix, so became pretty intimately involved down in the area in the InfoSec community. Good group of guys down there. So if you have some time, I know they already had something like 1,800 registrations for the virtual conference. I'm like, holy crap. Andrew was posting about it earlier this week. But it should be good, right? It's always a good group and a good set of topics that they create down there. Sweet. Other than that, I don't think we have. There's a lot that's going on in the news and otherwise. There's a couple of items I know that are on your list. One that I wanted to pull up before you got there, though, Ken, was the OWASP top 10.
Oh, God, I haven't looked at that yet.
You haven't looked at it? So I'm gonna post the link right now. Whoops. This is the proposed base statistical data. This was, I'm not sure who actually dropped this up there. Was it Philip Durick, or I know that Brian is working on it. Brian Glass, Professor Glass, who's been on the podcast before. But this is their list, right? I have feelings about this. I don't know if you do. What your thoughts are on that? If you just look at the initial proposal, not necessarily the statistics underneath it, but the initial changes to the top 10. Anything stick out to you there? Anything you want to talk through?
Yeah, so it looks like going through this line by line, looks like A3 was sensitive data exposure, and now it's going to be cross-site scripting. First opinion there is, can we stop calling it cross-site scripting? Can we just call it content injection? That's my only thing about that. Just more generically, content injection, I feel like, is probably more descriptive and accurate title, but no hard opinions. That's always been on there. But I think what's interesting here, or the one that I thought was interesting, is that insecure deserialization moved from A8 to A5, and it's been merged with XXE. But then in its place is SSRF, which, how many times have we talked about SSRF on this podcast? I feel like that's probably apropos. And then what's the other change here? Do people see XXE a lot? Because I mean, I know that it's I mean, obviously it's a thing, and it's been a thing for a long time. But yeah, I
don't know. If you remember back at one point we had, I think it was Jess on the podcast talking XXE, and I know it's still a thing for a lot of like the Java and .NET APIs. Anything that's using SOAP or some of those frameworks. So I think that in between businesses is where you see it more. I know in startups and startup land and hipster language land, it's not as big a thing. Like it's been a long time since I've seen a valid XXE, right? Just in my testing, but I know the organizations that I'm dealing with aren't building SOAP-based services anymore. It's a lot more RESTful and JSON stuff than it is XML. So for me, it makes sense that it's a part of insecure deserialization. In general, I'm with you as the specific vulnerabilities like cross-site scripting and even server-side request forgery, which is it's a form of injection, right? Like I have a hard time with this. Like we have a named vulnerability that's in the top 10 list.
Yeah, it's like almost as if it's more leaning towards like a type confusion or something like that, where the user input is being commingled, whether it's with HTML templating or whether it's with an HTTPS request to another service. It is just a confusion on the boundary there. Like what is user input and what did the developer write? So I don't know. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's all injection in some form, if you want to call it injection, but yeah, we call it out by specific named vulnerabilities, which I don't know how I feel about that. Actually, it seems pretty.
And then again, and honestly, yeah, this is a discussion that we've been having for a long time, right? Like, I mean, I remember having this back in the fishnet days when we're trying to name vulnerabilities for the reports, right? Like, cross-site scripting or even SQL injection is like the exploit, right? It's not necessarily the vulnerability we're talking about or the risk that we're talking about. So like, we're trying to name things based on, okay, what is the vulnerability in the code base itself, right? Oh, it's, some sort of lack of, user input validation and output encoding, right? But that's not, it's difficult because we have the top 10 and that's what people are expecting to see. Yeah. And I know we're getting away from it. Like have things in the broken authentication. So instead of calling out insecure direct object reference or function level access control, we've got broken access control. And so we've got other like broader categories that we're starting to list in there, known vulnerabilities. But we still have these kind of outliers of we've got XSS, we've got SSRF now. I mean, we had CSRF in there before, and yeah, so like I go back and forth on that. Because it's a good thing to have like a list that people recognize, but at times it's a disservice for actually having a discussion about how to fix these vulnerabilities, because it isn't necessarily the vulnerability itself, right? So, yeah,
I get the sense there's some use cases that the creators or the curators, I should say, of the OWASP top 10 list are probably privy to, which we should get Brian back on the podcast. And speaking of, I need to schedule people, but we should get Brian back on to sort of discuss this, maybe Philip as well, get Philip DeReich on here, but Brian at the very minimum, because I'd be interested in the use cases, because maybe there's a reason with use cases of how this list is being leveraged for different places. Like I don't use this list super frequently anymore. I not a huge need, though. I've used it in the past as a consultant, as blue teamer, and in each case there was different ways we would use this list. As a consultant, you'd focus on, what are the requirements? Well, the requirements are to train people on OWASP top 10. So you got to go through the list that's on there, and you've got a very specific set of course topics that are like SQL injection or SSRF or cross-site scripting or whatever. So perhaps there's, and then also tooling that's like says that it hits these, bullet points, and it's a requirement for, we've talked about this before, how this is, this list, unfortunately, is used as part of, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, used as like a meet certain compliance requirements. So whether it's like finding those types of vulnerabilities, or like I said, training people on those types of vulnerabilities, there are loosely aligned compliance goals or objectives or requirements or whatever. So like, I don't know, I guess it probably comes down to how this list is being used more widely than like, why these phones have specific naming conventions versus just a very general category, because injection is pretty wide, right? But at the same time, it's always the same crap, whether you want to call it cross-site scripting or SQL injection or SSRF or command injection or whatever you want to call it. It's always the same thing. It's confusion on what data is supposed to go where, like how data is supposed to be shaped, and then that's it. I mean, it's really simple in that way.
Yeah, I mean, they do try to call this out, and I know that we had this discussion with Brian last time. Is it's not supposed to be a vulnerability classification, right? It's just a list of risks, that's rated based on the data that people provide. And if they don't have good data, then they end up with a bad list. So, yeah, it's both.
I guess
good
technically,
and
mass
bad,
assignment falls under injection too.
Yeah, definitely.
I've never seen that one as a class of or type of risk, but it's a ever-present risk in a lot of applications.
Yeah,
even though it's called different things.
Yeah, because you could really, broken access control. They've got that graph in there, like the category overlaps.
Yeah,
that's a hard problem, right? I mean, it's a yeah.
Well, I mean, Sue, but then let's actually bring that up, because you just mentioned broken access control, but how many things fall under broken access? That's the kind of day we're having. Broken access control. Oh, man, sorry.
It works either way. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Well, it's getting spicy up in here. No, broken access. Oh, I did it again. Broken access control. Broken ass controls.
Yeah. Broken ass controls.
I mean, like forceful browsing or missing function at level access control, or technically IDOR, I suppose. There's a lot of things that you could put under that blanket. Same as you could with just injection. So it's kind of going against its own patterns. But I think this is one of the weird things, because this list is every time a new proposal comes out, it is the most contested, polarizing, discuss that length topic. So probably preemptively we should get Brian. We'll lure him in with some sweet, I don't know,
some sweet
swag or some sort of
that we'll send out in a year.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd love to get Professor Glass on.
Yeah. I don't know if there's much more else to say to that, right? Like outside of, if you want to get into that XSS discussion, which is also probably more than we wanted to dig into right now, but it would be fun to get like Philip or others to actually come in and talk through that, like their thinking with XSS. Because I don't know. I know anecdotally for me, XSS is not, and I know for you, right? It's become less of an issue, and yet we're pushing it back up to number 3 in the top 10, which means people are seeing it as a huge risk. And my gut and the news tells me it's blown, right? That's just anecdotal from what I'm seeing, what my experience is. Like, how often do we see something like broken authentication result in, or broken authorization, I guess. So IDOR or something like that result in sensitive data exposure. That's where the breaches happen, right? Or breach data is leaked. It's not, like I say, doesn't seem to have that same effect. But anyway,
Yeah. I know that's been a hot topic lately, but the I have seen it. I've seen cross-site scripting be weaponized in tandem with other vulnerabilities to have some fairly devastating effects. Especially when you talk about things like OAuth handshakes, and you talk about signing, single sign-on between services, or sites that are susceptible to CSRF. So usually in tandem with another, another issue, it can be pretty devastating. But I think there's some. Oh, actually, speaking of that, we're going to talk about some of the ways people actually get hacked today. So that should be interesting. But yeah, I see your point. Although, XSS is never fully going away. We still have to deal with it occasionally. But yeah, is it that interesting to me? No, not really. I mean, there's people who dedicate their entire work to that stuff, and that's cool, and it must be fun for them. I'm kind of about XSS anymore. It's like one more vuln. Yeah. I guess I'm kind of on most vulns, because it's just not like I don't care, but it's just like recognizing more of the, I guess, because I just focus on defending against this so much that it's more interesting to me to talk about like the defenses than it is the exploitation at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we can move on from the OWASP top 10 for today, anyway. I'm sure we'll get back to it. We'll bring in,
Let's talk about the North Korea thing, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That was like super. I didn't mean to cut you off, by the way, but that was sorry. Yeah. Do you have the? I mean, I guess I can post the link. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, I just got it. I'll post it. Yep.
I don't know how you heard about this, but this is super fun. Oh,
the
Google blog.
Yep. That's, I mean, the threat analysis group, they're the ones that actually, I think that was the initial release on it yesterday, right? But yeah, super. It's a watering hole attack is what it is, right? Is what they've created there. Targeting security researchers that are developing 0 days, right? That's realistically, that's what it is. And they built a blog. They invited guest researchers to post on the blog, and then were able to take over systems based on some ways that they built themselves, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is what I thought was in the few key points that were super interesting. Was one, that they created, that North Korea created intelligence, purportedly created Twitter accounts, blog accounts, enough accounts to make it seem legitimate, and then engage with researchers, like even having researchers guest blog post on their blog, which, it kind of reminds me, because back in the day, like a long time ago, I did a couple articles for InfoSec Institute. And when this is before, InfoSec Institute was like even really a thing or well known. And at the time I did it because I was like, well, I have information to share, and sure, I mean, I'll give you some of my testing. I think it was testing tricks and like, code to speed up things with burp or something like that. I don't really remember anymore, but I could see how this could happen, because when they hit me up, I hadn't really heard of InfoSec Institute too much. And, you let's be honest, when you're trying to build your career, you do things like guest blog posts, and you try to build your own brand by, doing these types of things. So I see why it's, susceptible, why people are susceptible to this. It would be, very easy to be asked to do a guest blog post, go do a little bit of research. It looks on the surface maybe legitimate. So I can see how that happens. That's very easy to understand.
Yeah.
So by doing those like legitimate accounts, they're getting people to then load their code in a Visual Studio environment, and then when they go and do the VS build steps, a DLL gets dropped and executed that is malware that helps talk back to a command and control and allows it's just malware that allows for command and control over that person, that security researcher's machine. Holy shit, is that like next level targeting? That's pretty serious. I mean, that's the levels that they went through for this are amazing. Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I've always one. Yeah. So I kind of go back to the threat models, right? Like we always kind of discount nation state actors, but that's exactly what we're dealing with here. Is they've got a specific set of needs that they're looking for, right? And it just shows that they'll go to basically any length to find 0 days, right? Like we've seen paid 0 days for a while, for a long time, that you can go and sell your 0 days on the market to a number of different organizations, and some of them could be related to other regimes, to governments across the world, because that's what they're looking for, right? But this is the first time that we've really seen something or uncovered something that is really that threat, right? I mean, it's maybe I'm having to take a step back, right, to think about the threat to the applications that I'm looking at, and then what a watering a hole attack looks like for the users that are related to the applications that you deal with, right? I mean, I'm sure where you're at GitHub, this is a huge thing. Like we've already seen takeovers of accounts that result to talk and go and npm packages and um, pipeline attacks and all that kind of thing, and all that depends on GitHub, right? Like
Man.
that threat is huge.
Yes. Yeah, I actually posted this link when you sent it over because Seth's the one that found this reading material there, and he sent it over to me, and I sent it to work because I was like, wow. There's a few reasons, like you said, yeah. Because first of all, man, so many thoughts. Where to begin? So, like you said, whether it's downloading code with Git, or whether it's loading it up in Atom or GitHub Desktop or VS Code or Code Spaces or any place where you have a trust boundary that's being crossed, you can't. We just had this, a reminder discussion again at work, where we were like, look, it is a trust boundary that's being crossed when you download code and you execute it, and you cannot kind of just wave your hands and say, well, now it's crossed a trust boundary. So if the code you're loading is malicious, well, that's on you. There's this fine line where you have to figure out what's reasonable for us to avoid a remote code execution situation, or, for instance, you load some like a dot file or something, and then it does some sort of like hook, to pull in other code, for instance, or push your settings or whatever it may be up to a central location, whatever it may be. You have to assume that once that code's into the environment that you're trying to, that the user is trying to run some code, look at some code, and modify some code. You have to assume that, or you can't assume that you can just wave your hands and be like, oh, it's okay. They understand they're loading code remotely, and like, it's fine. No, you have to take reasonable steps and be responsible about that. And that's the hard part, especially when you talk about with like loading packages from third-party sources. It's pretty, and anyways, it's very timely in one of the projects I may or may not be involved in, with, it may or may not involve online, code editors. And this is a very timely, relevant article, because it's very obvious that, yeah, if there is a weakness in whatever's loading up dot files, build steps, like Actions with GitHub Actions. You mentioned, again, another place of loading in external code with where also tokens are stored. You can only imagine the difficulty in keeping these things secure and like figuring out where boundaries lie. And man, it's just not, it's not trivial for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like I go back to even some of the basic tools that we use, right? So on the Mac, you think about like Homebrew, right?
Okay.
And how's that installed, right?
Mm.
Do you remember how Homebrew is installed? You basically do a sudo curl directly, directly from a website straight into it's basically RCE, and you know that everyone and their dog that is a Unix that used Unix in the past or Linux in the past runs that command because it gives them access to that environment, right? And so, and then extend that out to libraries, to everything else that we trust. Yeah, I mean, I think about GitHub Actions all the time because that was my initial reaction when I started pulling those actions, is because I'm like, man, we're trusting. It feels like random people on GitHub to write these actions, and I'm like, how far do we take this, right? Do I want to take the time to rebuild this or to edit this code, especially if you're trusting something like the main branch where they're just, they're able to push new code and execute it across all of these environments. Yeah.
Well, if you notice, if you ever read the documentation, and actually some people don't even realize this, there's such a concept as self-hosted runners. So instead of having GitHub run your actions, you can point to your own runner that'll run these actions, and you can secure that any way you want. But we give no guarantees at any point once you start using self-hosted runners. And there's a reason. We can do our due diligence up to a certain point, right? With our own infrastructure, or not up to a certain point. We can do our due diligence and make sure that it's secure. But once you start taking into your own hands and running your own runner, it's like, yeah, I mean, dude, that's not you. Yeah. You're running code that, I mean, obviously they give you, again, this is where the line is. There's a security boundary around, controls for how to get access into that. Like, say it's a private repo or something like that. You've got controls, you've got security controls for the organization that has people, like it can enforce two-factor auth and require it and do all these, there's all these little controls about who can merge what and what rules, like, you have to be a certain account to approve code changes, and you can institute all of these security controls. But at the end of the day, if you're using self-hosted runner, just know that code's gone. It's going on your infrastructure, and we don't have,
Well, not only that, right? Like, but if you're dependent on an action from someone else, like you're cloning their repository and then running that, right?
Right.
Inside of you are trusting that third party. And there's not a lot of, I mean, unless you're cloning that repository, it becomes the whole issue of, trusted third party code and vetted third party code. It's in so many places that it's almost an impossible problem to solve. And that's exactly what this group was targeting was, hey, we know the security researchers, and we know that the security researchers probably don't have the best hygiene, right? Like, and we know that, being in the industry is like, it's everybody that does this professionally at some point, hey, I just got to get my job done, right? And here's something that accept the risk and move on.
It's crazy that you posted this too, because last night I was just watching. I think I told you. Yeah, I told you I was watching this North Korea refugee who had escaped North Korea, and twice, by the way. And anyway, she was talking about the conditions in North Korea, and she's like, well, people still, now she lives in the UK with her son and her family, but she's like, people talk about World War II and Nazi Germany and concentration camps as if that was like a thing that used to happen. And she was like, that still happens that's happening in North Korea. Like, it absolutely is happening. And we know that's happening in China with the the Turkish Muslim population. So that we're in a weird, and there's a couple other articles you and I have like discussed behind the scenes. It's between North Korea and China and Russia and the cyber warfare. I just wanted to use that word. The cyber warfare landscape.
I know I could put it in the title for saying cyber warfare.
The cyber warfare episode.
It's cyber warfare episode.
But it's definitely been like, yeah, it's getting dicey out there. It's gotten dicey out there.
It is. And it all goes back to like, the misinformation campaigns and putting out disinformation. It becomes hard, right? When it's hard for one of us to distinguish and to know that, there's a hack going on against us, like the security research community. Obviously this was caught by Google at some point, but it's been going on for a while. Like I don't necessarily have a timeline in front of me, but it's been going on for a while. But like if we have a hard time detecting it, the layperson, the non-technical resource probably is just as like there's no hope. Is realistically what I'm trying to say is they don't like. How do you educate someone on this threat? Right. I mean, developers in general, they're trying to get their job done. They're trying to build features. They find a library that helps their life. They're going to use it.
Yeah, I mean, you can have education up to a certain point, but it's sort of like Patrick Toomey, who I work with, who I need to ask him to come on the podcast, but he said yes before. I think he said yes before, and I just didn't schedule it because I need to be better about scheduling. Anyways, but he talks about one of the things he talks about that I like is that you shouldn't like phishing awareness campaigns, for instance. That was the huge trend for a while, but the issue with phishing campaigns in general is you're assuming that the user should take on the responsibility of whether or not they click on links. And his point is, why aren't you hardening the technology enough so that if they do click on a link, it's not a problem? Why are we focusing on trying to get them to understand so much of what's a valid link and what's not, when we should be doing a better job of locking down just the fact that if they do that and just assume that they're going to do that, that environment should be hardened sufficiently to prevent attacks. So I think there's a balance for sure between the two approaches, but I like the thinking. I like the idea about that. Just because education is great and all, but it has its limitations. And even the smartest among us can be tired one day and honestly just accidentally click, right? So, and this is the same concept with, security researchers, getting duped by some North Korean or whatever adversarial nation state is coming after them. It's not impossible. And in this case, they unfortunately, it was a combination between being duped and, like the article talks about, running build steps in Visual Studio that then allow a DLL to be initialized that has command and control capacity. So, yeah. But I just think it's interesting. Definitely under attack is what I'm trying to say. It's no question. Everybody knows that, but like, man, is it more and more prevalent, which is like our next thing that we talk about, our article just points further to that. So,
yeah. And yeah, I mean, when it goes back to the phishing campaigns, when it goes back to actually being targeted, at the end of the day, we're all people. We all have weaknesses, like you're saying. So just because you're a developer, just because you're a security researcher, doesn't mean that you're not going to be susceptible to something like that. And then on the IT side, when it going back to the idea of the phishing training, or the like awareness campaigns that go out there. One that's built well, that has knowledge of your organization, like the success rate on those is going to be something insane, because like how many times do you still get, hey, you need to reset your password, right? from an automated system out there that's trying to be helpful and point you at a specific internal resource to actually reset that password.
Yeah. Which I think is a reason that, was it NIST or someone who got rid of the 90-day requirement to rotate passwords or whatever and said no longer is that. I think that was part of the thinking, is that it wasn't helping and it was actually leading to more like things like that, or, being socially, I mean, I don't remember the exact reasons. I think there were multiple reasons, but I think that was one of them.
Yeah. I mean, this came up in a recent training, or like we were doing it, with AppSec fundamentals or whatever training, and somebody was asking, well, what are your thoughts on password reset policies? And exactly what NIST is saying. Like, we've done a disservice because people can't remember passwords like that. We want them to be random, and yet we ask them to reset it every 60 days. It's going to lead to problems with randomness in passwords because they establish patterns. People have to have patterns to recognize that. Using a password manager, extending that out it's basically just a better way to go from a security perspective.
Password managers, man. Oh my gosh. All right. Among security pros, not a big deal. It is surprisingly hard for me to get people that aren't into computers to use password managers. I had the most recently, I don't know if you want to call it, it wasn't infuriating. It was depressing realization of how complicated people view password managers. This is one reason why, I don't know why I think this, because if I can't get you to use a password manager, I'm not sure you'd understand the YubiKey would make it easier. But I do like the standard of WebAuthn, which we keep teasing out. We'll have to get to WebAuthn actually one of these days. Web authentication, which, if you're not familiar, is just using some other device to sort of like a YubiKey to authenticate you. But anyways, I like that idea better than say password managers, just having two-factor auth in a way that is pretty easy, once it's set up. But that's the thing, is like once it's set up, and I'm not kidding, man. Because I'm sure everybody listening has this, where you have friends and family, especially those that are a little bit older, around Seth's age, that maybe aren't. No, just joking. Yeah, for those listening and not watching, I just got the middle finger from Seth. But in his advanced age. But anyways, so it's a little bit infuriating, because they're like, I got hacked. And again, this is one of those situations where, like, no, you clicked on a link and you gave your credentials, or no, you used a very basic password that matches your username or something like that. And then it's like, well, use a password manager and don't do these things. And then it's just, or two-factor auth. Yeah, I've been trying to get for a certain family member, I've been trying to get them to use two-factor auth so they stop getting hacked. And I'm not even exaggerating when I say probably 5 times hacked on Facebook, in the last 6 years, we'll say. So it's definitely like, we're still a long way off with password. I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent, man. It's just been infuriating to try to get people that are non-technical to secure themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's hard, right? It takes diligence, and that's the issue. And that's the problem. That's exactly what this North Korean hack is about, is the security researchers don't necessarily follow their own advice at all times. And when they don't, and when it falls down, it can have devastating effects. So someone someone, again, that doesn't have the interest or doesn't have the expertise to actually implement a 2FA or to implement any of those things and understand what's going on, it's just one big jumble, and it feels to them unnecessary steps. And websites and mobile applications don't make it easy to use either, right? So if I've got a password manager, like some of those sites and some of the applications themselves that don't allow like either copy paste or like kind of the overlay to easily get those passwords in, all of a sudden I have like a 16 or 20 character long random string that I'm trying to import from one device to another. And, it, like, even for me, it's like, oh crap, I've got to actually do this. It makes it extremely difficult. Like, you want to live that, go put in a 26 character random string for your Netflix password. Good luck with that, right? Like, it's just like, oh shit, right? We had this problem, right? Like, back at the company that shall not be named, right? Like, the Wi-Fi password that they would generate, what, 128 character like string.
God.
Right? And they were like, hey, this makes it ultra secure. And then what did they do? Like, every time somebody came to the office, they had to print it out on a piece of paper and give it to them.
Font, yeah.
Because it was so difficult and no one could remember what it was, right? Like, I was just like, we're defeating the purpose of having a secure string here because we've made it so difficult to use. Like, usability and security have to go hand in hand. But
yeah, paper would literally sit around that office for months. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because you'd have to pass it around, right? Like,
have to keep
anybody came to visit the office. Yeah.
I think that was for like, oh yeah, that's just so stupid. Yeah, but you're right. There's a point at which, I mean, dude, when I got my new phone, that was kind of a nightmare trying to get it all set up from one phone to the other for like the purposes of things like Duo, and another authenticator I use. And it definitely made it difficult for sure. Security using like security mechanisms in general add a little bit of extra work to it. And if you're the average user, again, this is where it's like, I think that there's a little bit of confusion on what's your responsibility and what's the platform's responsibility. And, definitely like two-factor auth and password, your password and how you manage that. That's definitely more of an area that is the user's responsibility to a degree, right? Obviously, once they give you a password, they submit a password and save it in your system, that's on your end. But in terms of, how the password's formed and then where it's kept by the user, and then if they've enabled two-factor auth and if they have what they're doing, to use, like if it's an SMS versus an authenticator app, there's different risks there, different benefits, different, it's just different. So, or it can be very different, text versus an authenticator app versus a YubiKey.
Yep.
Anyways, yeah, I don't know how we got off on that, but how it goes.
Well, it all leads back to that security hygiene discussion that we're having about security researchers in general. So all this has shown to me, right, that article and this watering hole attack is that no one is safe. And just because you do security for a living doesn't mean that you're following all those proper security protocols in every situation, right? We've all got our limits. We've all got, this website doesn't matter. This is a random forum, right? Like, I don't have access to my, password vault right now. Oh, I'm just going to download this software and run it because it seems like an interesting exploit, right? That kind of thing that happens across the board. And again, it always targets the human element. So just because you're a security researcher doesn't mean that you can't be targeted and you can't be exploited.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I think I was looking at Slack and I don't know, Toaster 32. Is that the way?
I think that's Lee, isn't it?
Yeah, Lee. Yeah. Using that third-party code, doing research is a good reason to use clone, clean VMs and snapshots that are isolated and monitored, which is true and accurate. And if you should be doing that. But to your point, Seth, sometimes people get sloppy and lazy and time constraints, bandwidth constraints.
Time constraints. Yep. And that's what they're counting on.
By the way, I make fun of you about your age, but I'm only like a few years younger. I don't think people realize that. I'm only like a few years younger than Seth, but it's fun to mess with them. No, it's just I was reading Slack. I'm like, just so everybody knows, we're almost the same age. It's just I like
It's
Nobody
just
says no.
the white hair that I'm getting, right? The grays. I'm more advanced. That's what it is.
That's all it is. You're a more advanced hacker. So the last thing I wanted to get into before we jump off here, which I actually I did not expect us to go 55 minutes and still be like cramming to get a topic in, but here we are. So can I talk about the Parler bit from follow up?
Sure. Let's do it. Because we talked Parler last week. I think it was, last week a little bit, and kind of the whole evolution of deplatforming something. So you had an update on that, so go for it.
Yeah, well, I think it was the episode before last, but I could be wrong.
Oh yeah, it was 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. You're right. Yep.
But this is one of those cases where some possibly new information is coming to light that makes it a little bit less. Makes me feel like, okay, maybe there's more to this than the initial reaction. Because obviously my initial reaction, we don't have to go over it, but I think, pretty much ours, but I'll definitely own the fact that I was like, what the hell? Like, you can't just take a platform offline just because it doesn't agree with your views. I mean, unless it's like, clearly breaking the law or something, crazy, where the entire platform is just dedicated to something that's clearly not, there's gray area for sure. But anyways, my point is it was like, at least it was concerning. Now here's some new information, or at least some new information. And then, Daniel Miesler, who we've had on the podcast, who I respect a whole bunch, love the guy, released his newsletter. One of the things he mentions in there is that, the founder of Parler's, wife is Russian, and there's some details emerging that he kind of points to the fact that there's pictures of her wearing a shirt that says like trust me, I'm a Russian spy, stuff like that, which could very well be a joke. It could, and he even admits, could very well be a red herring. But there's a lot of like little tidbits that kind of make you feel like there's a potential for foreign actors to be, like, for instance, they claim 12 million users, but maybe it's more like 10 million. But there's a couple million from not in the US, right? Active users on the site. And I'm just going to post one of the articles. It's Daily Mail, so I'm not sure how seriously I take that, to be quite honest with you. But
so we're basically becoming
gossip.
Never mind. Gossip column. Right? Yeah.
But what's interesting is, I guess what I'm saying is there's the potential, or at least Daniel brings up the point, that perhaps there is a known intelligence operation being employed within Parler, and perhaps the reason they were taken offline, or I think I'm adding this part. Perhaps the reason they were taken offline necessarily wasn't because, some of the percentage of the users, and I just want to be clear, a percentage of the users had, organized, and we had the Capitol riots and all that. Perhaps one thing that will come to light is that this was actually a long-running advanced intelligence operation, and the companies that took them offline had discussed this, are aware of that, perhaps even coordinating with the government. And in that case, I think what we should all do is remain objective, take the facts as they come. As we learn more, just keep an eye on it. And so that, to me, would feel a little bit more, I'd understand that more, and that'd be a little bit more tolerable than if it was just like, well, these people have this political opinion, and so they don't get to, talk to each other or whatever. Like, that didn't feel great, right? That felt like some Orwellian bullshit. But, seeing that there might be this might be a massive intelligence operation is just one interesting way to look at it. So yeah, just keeping an open mind and keeping the facts, watching the facts as they come. I don't know what else you think about all that.
Yeah. And that was the other interesting thing, is that there was another article just recently. I think it was, but here, I'll post it as well, like from Bloomberg. That's basically saying the new partner does definitely have ties to the, the Russian government. And whether or not that actually equates to, I mean, them controlling Parler, being able to see what's on the site and track people, you don't know, right? But realistically, we don't know about any of those larger social media platforms, what actually gets turned over to agencies that request information from them, right? It becomes I mean, basically, it's just, you got to be careful and you got to protect yourself is really what it boils down to. And that goes, from, hey, the North Koreans are targeting my community, like the security research community, to, hey, I'm just on Facebook and I'm posting something. Who is it that, what is it that I'm sharing? What is it that I'm actually doing? And what sort of information am I giving these big companies, these social media sites that, if you want privacy, you probably shouldn't be using them in the first place, right? That kind of.
Yeah. Be careful. I was just having that conversation over the weekend with my wife, who I was like, hey, we were just talking about the more apps, like why I have an aversion to installing an app for everything on my phone. And I was just like, literally the more you put on your phone, the wider the attack surface is, bottom line. And that goes for social media sites or anything else. They may make you aware of the permissions that they are requiring to run on your phone. And it may all seem legitimate, but you're still extending the attack surface on your device. Your device is now more vulnerable each time you install an app. For the most part, again, there are gray areas out there, but we don't need to get into all edge cases. One thing I do want to say too, Seth, is that I'm also fully aware that it could be a situation where we're using the potential for this to be an intelligence, Parler to be an intelligence weapon to create divisiveness amongst the population. That theory could be thrown out there to also skew us to make it more palpable that Parler was taken offline. So like a little triple play there. So I'm not ruling that out either. I'm keeping the tinfoil hat on. So
keep the tinfoil. You got to keep that tinfoil hat on, right? Yeah, I don't know. I go back and forth because that was the other thing. I think today they announced that that MyPillow guy got banned from Twitter as well, right? And again, for divisive speech, it sounded like he'd been warned a few times. They've got other rules that they've like community or civil, I can't remember what they called it, what Twitter calls it, but they've got kind of a set of new rules on, hey, guess what? You're basically not allowed to just attack random institutions and say stuff that's not true over and over. We'll give you a warning. We'll give you a little bit of a grace period, but we're going to ban you if you keep doing it over and over. So, but I still go back and forth with the power that these social media sites have, and they are trying to be more transparent. But I don't think they expected to have that amount of power when they started, and we didn't expect to be giving that up. It's kind of this weird conglomerate of issues that have combined over the last couple of years with the discourse that goes on and almost the monopoly power that they have in the social space that is causing these issues to pop up. I don't know. I don't envy those people in how they actually institute those rules or try to come up with those rules, because they aren't. I mean, on the one side, they're providing a public service, but on the other side, they were never elected to do that, right? It's not like they're a public official deciding on what's best and everybody's gotten together and voted them in. It's just we vote with our eyes and with our apps.
Yep.
Well,
yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, yeah. We don't have
social media is along with, I just think that like, whether it's social media or whether it's really just any platform where, you know, you've got the ability to control, like it could be, you know, back in the day it was print media, now it's online, right? So any medium where one side of the coin gets to talk and the other doesn't is going to create some serious issues. But it's been interesting because we're in a time, and I think it's been more prevalent because we're all at home and because we've got some serious tension globally. Like there's tension. No, I mean, dude, you can feel the tension. I mean, just going outside, going somewhere, you can feel everyone's tense. Everyone's been cooped up. Everyone's dealing with this horse shit, you know. You know, it is what it is. You know, nobody's loving it. So I think it's when everybody's miserable, or not. I'm not saying everyone's miserable. When everyone's dealing with something that's not exactly fun, and there's a tense environment, just a situation for it to combust. And I think that's what you saw being taken advantage of during the last few months, and arguably the last year, but especially the last few months. So,
yep.
Like, it's interesting, man. We're in a weird time. Just keep yourself safe, I guess. Be careful of what you download. Be careful of who you talk to. Not saying to be
and use a password. Yeah, and use a password manager in 2FA or MFA.
And stop clicking on these damn links. Stop.
As we post links for you to click on. Yes, that's how this works.
Yeah.
Oh, crap.
Stop giving your Facebook credentials out. You're not getting hacked. You're just falling for random crap. So, but yeah, he's two-factor. He's a password manager.
Sweet. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's everything for today. As always.
Oh, you might want to mention Toller, what Ken Toller just said.
Go for it.
Now he mentions that tax season is happening. We're all gearing up for tax season. I know I'm collecting paperwork now. So the phishing campaigns are underway for tax season. So warn your family, friends, whoever you want to warn. That's ongoing.
Speaking of which, like I don't know if we want to get into this too much, but the most recent payout for the government, like that $600 came to like some people as a debit card. I don't know if you heard this, and the debit card looks super, super sketch, right? Just like a random bank, didn't really say it's from the IRS, just looks super, super sketchy. And I was actually proud of, my like in-laws called me up and they're like, we got this like random, debit card in the mail. Looks like it's, from this bank. And I was like, no. I'm like, yeah, shred it. Wait. Let me do some research. It turns out that it's totally valid, right? But the way that they went about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the government. Oh man, I've got to find the article on this.
Yeah, the CDC called me like 2 days ago or a day ago about a survey. And it was so super sketchy. And then I did a little homework. It turns out it was legitimate, but it was like so freaking sketchy. And obviously I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything. Who are you? Why are you calling? But yeah, so that's actually, this is the problem, right? This is part of the problem is they're actually.
Well, and this was the article that I actually found because it came in and it's like, oh, here's your economic impact payment Visa debit card, right? Here. And so I found like actually the AARP talking about it. They're like, don't throw this away. This is actual money from the government, right? But if you look at that link,
are you subscribed to AARP?
No, but this was when I went to Snopes and stuff. This is the article that I found. I was like, holy shit, this is valid, right?
So when you went to your AARP account.
Yeah, man, dude. Yeah. But you look at the card, right? And it's got Star Network, it's got MetaBank on there. It totally looks like a fish. I'm so frustrated, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, we fail, right? Like we just fail.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I
Trust
mean,
the
if the
stars on
government's
the card. Yeah.
making it really super, I mean, yeah, it's just like we've all the training that's been given to teach people that this is not how business is done, and legitimate entities won't contact you in this way, and they're just undoing it. Just thank you so much, government. You're really helping out, you fucking winners.
Yeah. Yep. IRS is winning.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man. Yeah. So, yeah. All right. Be safe out there. Find us on all the social media sites, or join our Slack if you want to talk about stuff further. But yeah, appreciate everyone listening and being a part of the AppSec community. We'll catch you all online. See you next week.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Bye.